6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello and welcome to 6 Minute English from BBC Learning English. I'm Rob.
And I'm Georgina.
Now, Georgina, how resilient are you?
Resilient? You mean able to cope with difficult situations. I have a pile of work to do today, but I'm remaining calm and not getting stressed.
Well, that's good. You are showing resilience. And today we're discussing whether we're born with resilience or we have to learn it.
OK, Rob, but first I expect you're going to ask me a question. Bring it on.
OK. Resilience is also a word used in science to describe the characteristic of a substance or object. But what does it mean? A, that it's very tough or hard. B, that it can return to its original shape after being bent. Or C, it can turn from a solid into a liquid quickly.
I have a feeling it means B, an object that returns to its original shape after being bent.
OK, I'll let you know if you were correct at the end of the programme. But let's talk more about human resilience. There are many self-help books and motivational speakers, all promising us we can learn to be resilient.
Well, it is a useful trait to have, and it's something that can help you deal with many difficult situations, from coping with the pressures of work to handling the death of a loved one.
And it's more than just telling someone to toughen up or get a grip, as Dr. David Wesley knows. He is head of psychology at Middlesex University and talked about levels of resilience on the BBC World Service programme, The Y Factor.
First of all, there's our social supports, our communities, our families, the people who are important to us, the organisations we work for. So one way we can look at resilience is to measure that, the amount of social support available to us. Another way to think about resilience is to think about how we think about the situations we're in. So, for example, one way to look at that would be just to look at how optimistic people are as a guide to how resilient they might be when times get tough. And then a third level that we can look at for resilience is a biological level, how well we can soothe ourselves, calm ourselves down, how well we can actually regulate our own nervous systems at times of distress.
Right, so Dr. Wesley describes social supports, the people around us who we can talk to and support us and generally make us feel better. I think he's saying with more support, we'll feel more resilient.
It's interesting to note that a resilient person isn't necessarily someone quiet who doesn't make a fuss and gets on with things. Some experts think it's people who ask for help and use this social support network who are acting in a more resilient way.
It's a good point, and another level of resilience is how optimistic someone is. Being optimistic means having positive thoughts about the future and believing things will turn out well. A positive mind means you can deal with situations that at first look tough. Another level Dr. Wesley mentioned was our biological level, how our bodies cope in times of distress. Distress is the feeling you get when you are worried or upset by something.
So when we're distressed, a resilient person is able to soothe his or her body and regulate his or her nervous system, which helps them stay calm.
But Rob, the big question is, are we born with resilience or can we learn it? Experts speaking on the Y Factor programme tended to think it could be learned.
Yes, one of them is Anne Maston, a professor at the University of Minnesota. From her studies, she found it was something that we learn when we need to.
Anne Maston talks about how some of the children she studied manifest resilience from the start. When something manifests, it shows clearly and is easy to notice. They remain resilient despite adversity, a difficult time in their life that they have had to face.
Other children, what she calls the late bloomers, started off less resilient, struggled with adversity, but turned their lives around by becoming more resilient. Maybe we can learn resilience from having a bad experience.
Well, one thing Anne went on to say was that families and friends can be a great support and help with resilience. Those that were late bloomers only connected with adults and mentors later in life.
Yes, she says that teachers or parents are role models in how to handle adversity. And children are watching. They're learning from the adults around them by seeing how they react when they get challenged by something. Time now to find out how resilient you are when you discover the correct answer to the question I asked earlier. I said that resilience is also a word used in science to describe the characteristic of a substance or object. But what does that mean? Is it A, it's very tough or hard? B, it can return to its original shape after being bent? Or C, it can turn from a solid into a liquid quickly? And what did you say, Georgina?
I said it was B. It can return to its original shape after being bent.
And you are right. Well done. Bamboo is a good example of a resilient material. You can bend it, it doesn't break, and returns to its original shape.
Thanks for the science lesson, Rob. Now we need to recap the vocabulary we've mentioned today.
Yes, we've talked about being resilient, an adjective that describes someone's ability to cope with difficult situations. When you do this, you show resilience.
Someone who is optimistic has positive thoughts about the future and believes things will turn out well.
Distress is the feeling you get when you are worried or upset by something.
When something manifests itself, it shows clearly and is easy to notice. And adversity is a difficult time in somebody's life that they have had to face.
And that brings us to the end of this discussion about resilience. Please join us again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye!
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
OK, I want you to close your eyes, focus on your breathing.
Neil, can we do this later? We've only got 6 minutes.
OK, Catherine. Welcome to a mindful edition of 6 Minute English, where we're exploring the rise of mindfulness, particularly in schools.
And we'll be teaching 6 items of vocabulary along the way. So I think we should start with mindfulness itself.
Being mindful as an adjective means being calmly aware of everything in your body and mind. You only focus on now.
People practice mindfulness, the noun, by focusing only on their breath and not allowing themselves to be distracted by passing thoughts.
Indeed. It's traditionally associated with Buddhism and has become incredibly popular in the secular world, in workplaces, in private classes and even in schools.
Secular means non-religious, by the way.
OK, I just mentioned schools. How many teachers in the UK are trained to teach mindfulness? Is it A, 500, B, 5,000 or C, 50,000?
Let me focus really hard. I think it's 5,000.
A very mindful answer, Catherine, but I'll reveal the real answer later. Now let's hear from one teacher who's been practicing mindfulness with students for many years. Alison Mayo, head of early years at Dharma Primary School, thinks it's particularly suited to young children. Why?
That's very natural for children to be in the present. And we really kind of celebrate that because that is a place where they are learning. So if they feel grounded, then they can really develop their concentration and their focus and relax. Learning happens so much more easily if you're relaxed and happy.
Alison said it was natural for children to be in the present.
The present means now. You'll know the term from the present tense in grammar. And people who practice mindfulness use this phrase a lot, to be in the present or in the present moment.
It sounds simple, but actually it's very hard to achieve.
Well, Neil, it might be for an old chap like you, but for young people, Miss Mayo thinks it's very natural.
Fair enough. Being grounded, as she says, helps students concentrate and learn in a relaxed way.
Grounded is another good adjective there. It means rational, sensible, clear thinking.
So she's a fan of mindfulness, and there's growing evidence behind its benefits.
Yes, the UK's National Health Advisory Body has recommended it to help treat conditions like depression and anxiety.
Studies have shown it reduces levels of the stress hormone cortisol.
And a new study has claimed that eating mindfully can actually help people to lose weight.
You mean eating slowly?
Yeah, slowly, and really experiencing and tasting the food. Not being distracted and not eating too much too fast. Anyway, Neil, is mindfulness taking over the world?
Well, not quite yet. There still aren't many detailed studies on it, and some critics say the studies we have show a publication bias. In other words, only the positive results are published.
A bias is when you support something or someone in an unfair way because of your preferences or beliefs.
What seems certain is that mindfulness has entered into many aspects of modern life, at least here in the UK. Now, let's look back at our question. I asked how many teachers in the UK have been trained in mindfulness.
And I said 5,000.
Well, it was actually 5,000.
Yay!
Well done. According to the Mindfulness Initiative. And it keeps on growing.
So before we finish up, here's another question that might be useful for our listeners. What's the difference between mindfulness and meditation?
Aha, that's not so easy to define. Meditation is the broader term. When you meditate, you spend time quietly, focusing your mind, often for relaxation or spiritual purposes. Mindfulness is a particular kind of meditation where you try to empty your mind of thought. Does that make sense?
Yeah, more or less. So we'll let our listeners meditate on that answer. And before we empty our minds, let's look back at today's words. We had mindfulness, mindful, and mindfully. They all relate to the particular practice of being only focused on what's happening now.
What's happening now, or we could say what's happening in the present. People often focus on the past, thinking back about mistakes or happy memories.
Or on the future, which can be full of worries. But by being in the present, you overcome these thoughts and fears. Next we had secular. It contrasts with religious. So, while a church is a religious building, we also have secular buildings, like factories and shops and hospitals.
All non-religious buildings, in other words.
Exactly. Now, tell me, Neil, are you feeling grounded right now?
You're asking if I'm thinking clearly and feeling connected to the world. Do you even have to ask, Catherine? I'm a very grounded person.
You are most of the time. Most of the time you're naturally grounded. Every now and again you get a bit panicked, but hey. But some of us need to remember to slow down, chill out and meditate once in a while.
Yes, that would be meditate, meaning to take quiet time to focus deeply on something.
Exactly. Now, for more ways to improve your English, I suggest you mindfully visit our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube pages.
Yes, focus only on our pages. Don't be distracted by anything else.
Bye.
Goodbye.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello, this is 6 Minute English from BBC Learning English. I'm Beth.
And I'm Neil. Phew, I've spent a day in meetings, then shopping, then collecting the kids from school. I'm exhausted, Beth. What have you been doing today?
Oh, not much. Just sitting around, doing nothing, relaxing and kicking back.
Lucky you. Don't you have any work to do?
It may not look it, Neil, but I'm actually as busy as a bee. If you've seen nature documentaries about worker bees flying from flower to flower, you probably think animals are always on the move. But the surprising truth is, away from the cameras, most animals spend most of their time doing absolutely nothing at all.
In the natural world, where finding food and shelter is hard work, why have some animals evolved to do nothing? And if it's good enough for animals, would being lazy work for humans too? That's what we'll be discussing in this programme, and as usual, we'll be learning some useful new vocabulary as well.
But first, let me work up the energy to ask you a question, Neil. Of course, some animals have a reputation for lounging about. Lions, for example, can sleep up to 20 hours a day. But what is the slowest moving animal on Earth? Is it A, the giant tortoise, B, the three-toed sloth, or C, the koala?
Well, I think it's the three-toed sloth.
OK, Neil, I'll reveal the correct answer at the end of the programme. Now, it's no surprise that lazy lions love relaxing, but even animals with reputations for being busy spend time doing nothing. Look carefully into an ant's nest and you'll see around half of them just sitting there motionless. Here's Professor Dan Charbonneau, an expert in insect behaviour, discussing the lazy rock ant with Emily Knight, presenter of BBC Radio 4 programme Nature Bang.
Dan's research has focused on ant colonies, a species called Temnothorax regatalus, or the rock ant.
I think ants are sort of a symbol of like industriousness. You know, they have this whole tiny little society going on that's kind of similar to ours. Some idealized version of what humans might be. If we could only like pull it together and all work together, we could be as industrious as the ants. But then when you look at it, you know, roughly about half the colony is inactive at any given time.
We think ants are industrious or hard-working. Groups of ants called colonies seem tiny, perfect societies where everyone works hard for the good of the group.
Then why are so many of them inactive? One possible answer is that they're reserve ants, ready to step in if disease or disaster strike. But could it simply be that they don't work because they don't need to? Would you get out of bed on Monday morning if you didn't have to?
Maybe the ants can teach us a thing or two about relaxing, but wouldn't it get boring just sitting around all day?
Not according to psychologist Dr. Sandy Mann. She thinks being productive, working to produce a lot for the amount of resources we use, is overrated. Boredom has its benefits too, as she explained to BBC Radio 4 programme Nature Bang.
Would humans have invented bread or beer or fire, if we hadn't been bored and were wondering what on earth would happen if we mix this with this? Are all these sorts of inventions the mother of boredom?
But in this world of constant stimulation, switching off is harder than it's ever been.
That's why we're constantly swiping and scrolling and looking for the next big thing and the new thing, and we get bored of things very quickly. So it's a kind of paradox. To get rid of this unpleasant state of boredom is actually to allow more boredom into your life.
Dr. Mann doubts humans would have invented things without the curiosity that comes from being bored. Boredom is the mother of invention, an idea based on the famous proverb, necessity is the mother of invention, an idiom meaning that if you really need to do something, you will think of a way of doing it.
Instead of fearing boredom, we can open up to its benefits by switching off, stopping worrying or thinking about something and relaxing. Slowing down helps too, something we can definitely learn from our animal cousins.
I think now is a good time to reveal the answer to my question, since we have nothing else to do.
You asked me to name the world's slowest animal, and I guessed it was the three-toed sloth. Was I right?
That was the correct answer. With a top speed of 30 centimetres per minute, three-toed sloths move so slowly that algae grows on their coats. OK, let's recap the vocabulary we've learned from this programme, starting with the phrase kicking back, to stop doing things and relax completely.
The adjective industrious means hard-working.
A colony is the name given to a group of certain animals, including ants and some seabirds.
Someone who is productive is able to produce a lot for the amount of resources they use.
The proverb, necessity is the mother of invention, means that if you really need to do something, you will think of a way of doing it.
And finally, to switch off means to stop worrying or thinking about something and relax. Once again, our 6 minutes are up. It must be time to sit down, close your eyes and just do nothing. Goodbye for now.
Bye.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello, this is 6 Minute English from BBC Learning English. I'm Neil.
And I'm Georgina.
January is often the time when people make New Year's resolutions, things they want to start or stop doing in the new year. Have you made any resolutions for 2021, Georgina?
Well, for a start, Neil, I'm definitely going on a diet. Over Christmas, I really piled on the pounds with all that chocolate.
Yes, not to mention Christmas pudding. I'd already put on extra weight during lockdown, then even more over Christmas. So I definitely need to diet in 2021.
It's curious that we both made resolutions to lose weight, isn't it? I mean, most people overeat a bit at Christmas, then diet in January.
What are you saying, Georgina? Do you think we're worried people will call us fat?
It wouldn't be so surprising, Neil. After all, incidents of fat shaming are on the rise. That's what it's called when someone is criticised or humiliated for being fat.
In this programme, we'll be asking where the attitudes behind fat shaming come from. We'll be hearing how anti-fat attitudes are often implicit or unconscious.
Hang on though, Neil. Having a second slice of Christmas cake is hardly the same as being fat, much less obese.
That's true, Georgina. The word obese describes a person who's very overweight, with a lot of body fat. It's the term for a medical condition, measured using BMI, or the Body Mass Index. It's on the rise in the UK. In fact, that's my quiz question. How many adults in the UK are affected by obesity? Is it A, 1 in every 3 adults, B, 1 in every 4 adults, or C, 1 in every 5 adults?
I'll guess B, 1 in every 4.
OK, we'll find out the answer later. As you say, Georgina, the word obese has a very specific meaning. Here's Professor Abigail Sagai talking about the term to BBC World Service's The Y Factor. Listen out for when the word obesity started to be used.
The term obesity was coined in the middle of the 20th century as a concerted effort by medical doctors to say this is a medical issue, one over which we have authority and expertise.
Professor Sagai says the term obese was coined in the mid-1900s, meaning it was invented or first used in a particular way.
It originally meant an individual medical problem, something to be discussed between patient and doctor. But over time, obese has become a term of discrimination and abuse.
Psychology professor Chris Crandall has been involved in Harvard University's implicit bias projects, most famous for revealing racial prejudice. The tests also measure other kinds of biases, including weight.
Many of the beliefs we hold about other people are hidden from conscious awareness. So what goes through our mind, consciously or unconsciously, when we see very fat people? Here's Professor Crandall speaking to BBC World Service's The Y Factor.
We tend to think, at least in the Western world, of fat people as personal failures, as moral failures. People tend to think of fatness as an indicator of laziness, of overindulgence, of a lack of moral fiber, an unwillingness to take a hold of your own life. We, as everyday Americans and Westerners in general, tend to think that it's a personal attribute. It's a thing that you do to yourself, and as a result, you are deserving of scorn.
There is a commonly held prejudice that fat people are responsible for their condition because they're lazy, greedy, or lacking in moral fibre, the ability or determination to behave ethically or with self-control.
In the West especially, being fat or overweight is thought of as a personal attribute, a quality, characteristic, or feature that someone has. The idea is that fat people just are the way they are and have no one to blame but themselves. They should just exercise more or stop eating.
This leads some to treat them with scorn, a strong feeling of contempt or disrespect.
In reality, of course, weight isn't just about individual choices. How fat you are is also determined by environment and genetics, up to 80% in some cases.
And anyway, even if it was under personal control, fat shaming doesn't feel like the right way to help people lose weight.
So if it doesn't cause problems, maybe you can have that second slice of cake after all, Georgina.
Thanks, Neil, but I don't want to spoil my appetite for the quiz question you asked. Was I right about the number of UK adults affected by obesity?
What did you say, Georgina?
I guess the answer was B, 1 in every 4 adults.
Which was the correct answer. Fat is an issue affecting millions of adults in the UK alone, and with studies suggesting that obesity might be a negative factor linked to COVID-19, it's one that could affect millions more.
Food for thought there, Neil. Now let's recap the vocabulary, starting with obese. Dangerously overweight as measured by the body mass index or BMI.
This term, obesity, was coined or invented to describe a medical condition, although many people nowadays consider it a personal attribute, a quality or characteristic.
Fat shaming is criticising and humiliating someone for being fat or showing them scorn, feelings of contempt or disrespect.
Or it could also involve believing they lack moral fibre, the ability to behave correctly or with self-control.
That's all for this programme, but to find out more about your own implicit biases based on race, sexuality or weight, search online for Harvard IAT and take a test yourself. You may be surprised what you find out.
And to hear more topical discussion and vocabulary, join us again soon at 6 Minute English. Download the app at your usual app store and follow us on social media. Bye for now.
Bye.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello and welcome to 6 Minute English. I'm Neil and today we're going to improve ourselves.
Haha, how could we possibly get any better? I'm Rob and yesterday's topic is self-help and the self-help industry.
What do we mean by self-help? Well, it means trying to improve yourself psychologically, economically or in other ways without seeking official help.
For example, bookshops these days are full of titles which claim to boost your self-confidence, your wealth, your love life, or your career.
Yes, in just 7 days. There's a clear demand for this kind of thing. The self-help industry is worth $10 billion in the US alone.
That's a lot. That includes things like gym memberships, diet plans, and life coaching apps.
We'll be looking at why, but first, the self-help industry has been around for a long time. Which of these well-known books was published first? Is it A, How to Win Friends and Influence People? B, Think and Grow Rich? C, The Law of Attraction?
Could do with some help here. I'll go for the first one, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
OK, well, before we go further, let's take a trip around a bookshop in Manchester to find out which self-help books are selling well.
Let's listen to Emma Marshall, a manager at Waterstones Bookshop. What's popular now?
At the moment, we're in the tidying up and getting rid of things trend. But before that, we saw colouring in, which became a huge thing. It's kind of dwindling now because these sorts of trends come in and then they go. Like last year, we saw hygge, which is the Danish art of living well, apparently. So we're taking from all sorts of cultures. And so I think right now the trend is clearly about slowing down in your life.
Emma says there are a couple of trends right now. A trend here means something new which is popular for a period of time.
Yes, so she mentioned tidying up and getting rid of things. Would you buy a book about tidying up, Neil?
I'd be more likely to buy a book about it than actually tidy up. She also mentioned a current trend about slowing down in our lives.
Well, I can agree with that. And previous trends included colouring in. These books have black and white outline pictures that you fill in with colours.
I used to do that as a child. Very therapeutic.
Therapeutic, making you feel more relaxed and less anxious. It's related to the word therapy.
Although the colouring in trend is dwindling, it's becoming weaker. They're selling fewer colouring in books.
So, trends come and go, but the industry is going from strength to strength.
To go from strength to strength means to remain strong or get even stronger. Why?
Dr. Jennifer Wild, a psychologist from Oxford University, believes that the internet is a big factor.
We've got used to searching for solutions online, and now these solutions even include how to fix or improve our lives.
And psychologist Caroline Beaton, writing on Forbes.com, said she believes that millennials are a big factor.
How do we define the term millennial? Also known as Generation Y, are people born between the mid-1980s and early 2000s. It's a common term in the news, often because people born in this time in the West are seen to have certain characteristics.
Yes, they're sometimes described as lazy and obsessed with themselves. And while that's not necessarily true, Caroline Beaton says millennials are highly self-critical.
Self-critical. They are aware of their own faults, which also means they're more likely to spend time or money on self-help. She says they spend twice as much as Generation Xers. Generation X refers to people born between the late 1960s and around 1980.
And one more possible reason why the self-help industry does well, it's very resistant to recessions. When the economy does badly, as we say, it goes into recession, people are perhaps even more likely to reach for self-help to improve their situation.
So there we are. Now, let's go back to another recession, the Great Depression of the 1930s in America, and to my question about which self-help book was published first.
Well, I said A, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
In fact, 2 of these books were published in the late 1930s. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie was first in 1936. It has since sold over 30 million copies. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill was published in 1937 and is believed to have sold over 100 million copies.
That's a lot of self-help. Have you read either of them?
I haven't read either of them, but perhaps I should.
Well, before we rush home and improve ourselves, let's improve our vocabulary.
Of course, today we had self-help, the activity of improving yourself, physically, mentally or in other ways, often through courses and books.
There are lots of trends in the self-help industry, and we also see trends in fashion, in music, in popular culture, like the trend for men to grow beards.
Are you talking about me? Anyway, I think the beard trend is dwindling. It's getting smaller, less influential.
Really? I'll stroke my beard here. I think that's very therapeutic. It makes me relax and feel good.
Maybe you're right. What about our next phrase, to go from strength to strength?
Well, you could say a business is going from strength to strength if it's earning a lot of money.
Indeed. And what about our term for young people, millennial? Are you a millennial, Rob?
Didn't quite scrape in there. I'm still Generation X, okay? But I do like to think I'm in touch with what millennials do, which includes having lots of different social media accounts.
Just like us. Do look up BBC Learning English on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube.
And good luck with your self-improvement.
Goodbye.
Bye.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.